सादर प्रणाम। एनसीईआरटी की वेबिनार सीरीज लिसनिंग टू लर्न के छठे पड़ाव पर आप सभी का स्वागत है। यह प्रोग्राम हमारे डीटीएच चैनल्स पर लाइव प्रसारित हो रहा है। कक्षा 9, कक्षा 10, कक्षा 11, कक्षा 12, साथ साथ ये डीवाई पाटिल यूनिवर्सिटी और एनसीईआरटी के यूट्यूब चैनल्स और फेसबुक एंड ट्विटर एंड इंस्टाग्राम हैंडल्स पर भी प्रसारित हो रहा है। व्यूअर्स अपने प्रश्न हमें यूट्यूब चैनल के माध्यम से पूछ सकते हैं। हम अपने इन प्रश्नों को इस श्रेणी में लेंगे, आखिर में लेंगे। आज हमारे साथ हैं प्रोफेसर प्रभात रंजन, जो कि डीवाई पाटिल इंटरनेशनल यूनिवर्सिटी अकुर्डी पुणे के वाइस चांसलर हैं, एंड ही इज़ ए ग्रेट वर्कर इन न्यूक्लियर फ्यूज़न रिसर्च इन दिस कंट्री, पायोनियर हैं। इनका साथ हमारे साथ आज है। और इसके बाद 21 सितंबर वेडनेसडे को भी होगा। दो लेक्चर्स की, दो टॉक्स की ये सीरीज़ है। आज पहला पड़ाव है, पहला लेक्चर है। ये इनका प्रोग्राम का टाइटल है आज न्यूक्लियर फ्यूज़न ड्रीम्स ऑफ एनर्जी, ड्रीम सोर्स ऑफ एनर्जी। व्यूअर्स, आप सभी के संज्ञान के लिए मैं 2 मिनट में इसको समराइज़ करना चाहूँगा, इस एक्टिविटी को। भारत एक इंडियन न्यूक्लियर फिशन, और फिशन के बारे में हम सब जानते हैं। हमारे पास काफ़ी रिएक्टर्स हैं, सोर्सेज हैं हमारे पास। हमारे देश में सन 1980 के आसपास जो नाभिकीय संलयन की प्रक्रिया है, न्यूक्लियर फ्यूज़न, उस प्रक्रिया पर आधारित एक्सपेरिमेंटेशन शुरू हुआ। सबसे पहला लैब IPR भाट गांधीनगर में हुआ, जो कि DST के डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी के सहयोग से वहाँ पर एक लैब बनाई गई, और जिसमें कि आदित्य नाम का एक रिएक्टर, न्यूक्लियर फ्यूज़न रिएक्टर कार्य कर रहा है। उस रिएक्टर के बारे में आज प्रोफेसर रंजन हमें बताएंगे। और न्यूक्लियर फ्यूज़न रिसर्च जो हिंदुस्तान में, भारत में शुरू होने वाला जो प्रोजेक्ट है, उसमें किस तरह से भारत को आगे बढ़ना है, क्या उसकी रूपरेखा है, इन सब विषयों पर हम गहनता से चर्चा करेंगे। भारत ITER इंटरनेशनल थ्योरेटिकल एक्सपेरिमेंटल रिसर्च, थर्मोन्यूक्लियर एक्सपेरिमेंटल रिसर्च का हिस्सेदार है। ये ITER सदर्न फ्रांस में स्थापित हो रहा है। उम्मीद है कि सन 2025 तक वह पूरी तरह से स्थापित हो जाएगा और उसके रिजल्ट्स हमें मिलने लगेंगे। अब आज मेरे साथ इस ग्रुप में पुणे से प्रोफेसर रंजन जुड़े हुए हैं, और मेरे साथ NCERT स्टूडियोज़ में कुछ व्यूअर्स भी हैं, और मेरे कोलीग्स डॉक्टर CV शिमरे, जो कि मेरे ही विभाग में, विज्ञान एवं गणित शिक्षा विभाग NCERT में कार्यरत हैं। और इसमें सबसे कॉर्नर पर डॉक्टर सुनीता फरकिया, जो कि हमारे विभाग की विभागाध्यक्षा हैं। हम लोग यहाँ से जुड़े हुए हैं, और हमारे साथ कुछ व्यूअर्स भी जुड़े हुए हैं NCERT स्टूडियोज़ में। मैं सबसे पहले रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ अपनी कुलीग डॉक्टर CV शिमरे से कि वो प्रोफेसर रंजन को इंट्रोड्यूस करें और उनका स्वागत करें। धन्यवाद।
Good morning, and once again a very warm welcome to this Listening to Learn series hosted by NCERT. It is a privilege to have with us today Professor Prabhat Ranjan, who is a nuclear fusion scientist, a futurist, an educator, an innovator, an entrepreneur, and a science communicator. Professor Ranjan was the executive director of India's technology think tank organization, Technology Information, Forecasting and Assessment Council, popularly known as TIFAC, located in Delhi. He held the prestigious post from 2013 to 2018. TIFAC is an autonomous body of the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. It was during his tenure that TIFAC brought out the very important document, Technology Vision 2035. Prior to that, Professor Ranjan worked for nearly 20 years as a scientist, making important contributions to nuclear fusion research in India and in the United States. He had also worked on Chandrayaan-2 mission, wildlife, agriculture, brain-computer interface. Through his work on innovative assistive technology, he has brought smile on the faces of many persons with severe disability. The list of the achievements and contributions of Professor Ranjan to global science and technology is endless. He has also received several awards. Professor Ranjan was educated in Nether Heart School, which is located near Ranchi, and later he studied in IIT Kharagpur and Delhi University. He received his PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, where he carried out research on nuclear fusion at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory during 1983 to 1986. He returned to India soon after and carried out research in the area of nuclear fusion at the Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics, Kolkata, and at the Institute for Plasma Research, Gandhinagar. So we are indeed honored and privileged to have you once again here in this Listening to Learn series. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Professor Ranjan has a very strong association with our National Council of Educational Research and Training. He himself has been anti-SE awardee. Viewers, all of you know that National Talent Search Examination is a very prestigious program of National Council of Educational Research and Training, and we are yet privileged, Dr. Shimre, in continuation to what you introduced, Professor Ranjan, I like to welcome Professor Ranjan as an anti-SE awardee as well. Thank you very much, Professor Ranjan. Now it is all yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Gaganji. It used to be called National Science Talent Search Award in 1976.
Yes, at that time it
used
used
to
be.
The name was changed. And I was a beneficiary of that. And both in Kharagpur as well as Delhi University, I was recipient of the scholarship till I went to US. Let me come back to this topic, nuclear fusion, dream source of energy. As was being introduced, I was in Delhi heading TIFAC from 2013 to 18. It was very close to NCRT. In fact, gate number 2 of NCRT is on the same road that I used to cross every day in the morning and evening, and we're not very far off. And I will come back to this point later on because there's another story related to how I got into nuclear fusion a little later on. That's also not very far off from NCRT, how it happened. Let me start with the topic today. We have been seeing a lot of news items. For example, this particular news item was about a few months ago saying China's artificial sun sets world record and achieves plasma temperature of 120 million degrees centigrade. And if you read the footnote, it is saying 120 million Celsius for 101 seconds and 116 million for 20 seconds. You will understand the significance of these temperatures. The temperatures are somewhat like 12 crore degrees to 16 crore degrees. And inside the temperature of the sun, the hottest part of the sun, the core of the sun, is about 1.5 crore degrees centigrade. So we have achieved temperatures which are more than 10 times that of the sun. Similarly, there was another news. This was just about two weeks ago or 3 weeks ago on August 24th, where it says NIF, that is National Ignition Facility in Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, achieves breakthrough in laser fusion. There's one more new fusion system creates viable path to commercial fusion power with the world's strongest magnet. So suddenly there's a plethora of news that is happening around the globe related to nuclear fusion. So we are going to delve into this and try to understand why right now. So briefly, what I'm going to start by talking about is what is fusion? Why do we need fusion? What are the different approaches to achieve fusion? What is magnetic confinement? So there are different approaches to achieve fusion. I'm going to focus more on magnetic confinement. There are other ways, for example, laser fusion is an example of inertial confinement. Then as Gaganji was talking about, what is the work that has been going on in India for the last 4 decades and what is the progress? What is the current status around the globe? And then give an outline of what I'm going to talk in the next series of this talk on 21st as scheduled. तो एक्चुअली हम लोगों ने बचपन में पढ़ा था कि हनुमान जी एक बार खेल रहे थे और उनको आकाश में एक गेंद दिखाई पड़ी और वो गेंद और कुछ नहीं था, वो सूर्य था. So when Hanuman ji was playing, he suddenly noticed a ball in the sky which he thought he must go and capture and play with it. It attracted him, and so he went to capture that sun. So actually the story of nuclear fusion is something like this. What we are trying to do is to capture sun and put it into a box. This idea is great. The problem is that we do not know how to build this box. And this is the story that I'm going to be talking about today in this particular talk. So to start with, first, let me talk about what is nuclear fusion. As Gaganji was mentioning, many of us are aware of fission, but nuclear fusion is the opposite process. And as I will talk about it, this is a process through which we are getting energy in the sun itself. So the whole solar system, due to which we are surviving on the earth today, is because of the energy that is being produced from nuclear fusion. So fusion is a process of two light atoms uniting to form heavier atoms. In this process, it releases energy. I'm going to go into more into this detail, is that when does it release energy through this process. Now, when you take nuclei, you take an atom, you remove the electrons, the nuclei that is there is positively charged, and you want to fuse them together. To fuse them together, you have to bring them closer together. When you try to bring them closer together, then they repel each other. They try to force away from each other. And then you have to apply tremendous amount of force to overcome this repulsive nature, and that's why it's not very easy to do it. If you have oppositely charged particles, they'll attract each other, but what we are trying to do is to fuse same positively charged particles. So there's tremendous force required, and that's why we need to go to such high temperatures that we are talking about. I'd just like to show a slide on the history of this. About 100 years, 101 years ago, two important things happened. Meghna Saha, Dr. Meghna Saha, who set up Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics, where I joined in 1986 after coming back from US. He gave an equation that is now referred to as Saha ionization equation in 1920. That is considered to be the start of plasma physics, and I'll come back to why I'm talking about plasma here. This is not the plasma that we talk about in biological systems. The second thing happened was that Arthur Eddington in the same year said that the process through which the stars and the including sun gets energy is through nuclear fusion process. This was not known till earlier. About 12 years later, in 1932, nuclear fusion was demonstrated inside a lab. So first time in 1932, nuclear fusion was demonstrated in lab. तो 1920 जो ईस्वी है वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट था. 101 साल पहले की बात है. मेघना साहा का इक्वेशन, साहा ionization इक्वेशन, जिसको कि प्लाज्मा फिजिक्स स्टार्टिंग समझा जाता है, वो दिया गया. और आप लोगों को मालूम होगा कि अर्ली 1900 के आसपास कलकत्ता में काफी सारे फेमस इंडियन साइंटिस्ट हुए, जिनमें डॉक्टर सीवी रमन है जो कि नोबेल प्राइज विनर बने, डॉक्टर मेघना साहा, डॉक्टर एसएन बोस, डॉक्टर जेसी बोस. कलकत्ता एक साइंस का सेंटर बन गया था, वर्ल्ड ग्लोबल साइंस का. तो 1932 में न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन पहली बार लैब में डेमोन्स्ट्रेट किया गया. हाइड्रोजन बॉम्ब, जिसका आप लोगों ने नाम सुना होगा, उसका काम काफी पहले स्टार्ट हो गया था और अचीव भी हो गया. बट since 1955 we started working on controlled fusion. So what we see in hydrogen bomb is uncontrolled release of energy, uncontrolled release. We were not trying to confine that and control that. So the work on controlled fusion started around 1955, and if I remember it correctly, it was in 1958 in an International Atomic Energy Agency meeting, which was being chaired by Bhabha. He actually decided that the research on nuclear fusion will be open research, it will not be a classified research. Since then, the countries started to collaborate with each other, and that has been going on for a long time. As was mentioned by Gaganji, the ITER project in France is part of that international collaboration, of which India is a full member. But since the 1955, when the work on controlled nuclear fusion started, we always said that it is going to be in 20 years that we'll commercialize it. However, this 1955 has been changing now in 2021. We still keep saying the same thing, that it is going to be 20 years. In 20 years, we are going to achieve commercialization. So what is the story? Are we going to be saying the same thing for next 40 years? Or are we really going to achieve nuclear fusion in next 20 years? That is the point I would like to address today. क्या हम 20 साल में nuclear fusion achieve कर सकते हैं? यदि मैं न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन और फिशन को कंपेयर करूं, तो कंपेयर न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन वर्सेस फिशन. न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन जिसको नाभिकीय संलयन भी कहते हैं और हिंदी में, और न्यूक्लियर फिशन को नाभिकीय विखंडन कहते हैं. तो एक में हम न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन में हम चीजों को जोड़ते हैं, दो न्यूक्लियाई को, और नाभिकीय विखंडन न्यूक्लियर फिशन में एक हेवी न्यूक्लियाई को तोड़ते हैं। तो ये तोड़ने और जोड़ने की जो प्रक्रिया है उसकी वही डिफरेंस है न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन और फिशन में। So in fission, energy is gained by splitting a heavy atom. Heavy atom, for example, if I take uranium, uranium is one of the heavy atoms that is split into two atoms, and in this process, energy is released. There are two types of material related to this. One is called fissile material, in which any species of atomic nucleus that undergo, it can go automatically fission reaction, that is called fissile material. Uranium-235 is 0.7% only, 0.7% of naturally occurring uranium, whatever uranium you get, and uranium itself is not in large supply, it is in short supply. Only 0.7% naturally occurring uranium is uranium-235. There are other materials, fissile materials like plutonium-239, as well as uranium-233. These two are artificially produced from what are called fertile materials. For example, uranium-238, that is natural occurring, and thorium-232, these are natural occurring. So these fertile materials can be converted into fissile materials by absorption of neutron. Thorium, India has plenty of reserve. 25% of world's reserve is in India. Thorium-232 is in plenty in India. So there has been effort to convert this from thorium to fissile material like uranium-233 for a long time. We have not been able to achieve large-scale success in this so far. I'll again come back to this point. तो इसके उल्टा ही देखें हम, फिशन के उल्टा देखें फ्यूजन को, तो फ्यूजन इज कंबाइनिंग लाइट एटम्स टू फॉर्म ए हेवियर वन। जैसा कि सूर्य के अंदर में होता है, व्हाट हैपेंस इनसाइड सन, कि हाइड्रोजन आइसोटोप जो होते हैं, सॉरी हाइड्रोजन रिएक्शन से रिएक्शन होता है, उससे सन में एनर्जी होती है। और पृथ्वी पर हम लोग ज्यादा हाइड्रोजन आइसोटोप की बात करते हैं, ड्यूटेरियम ट्रिटियम की बात करते हैं, मैं समझाऊंगा कि क्यों हम करते हैं उसके बारे में, और उसमें भी एनर्जी उत्पन्न होती है। सो इन बोथ फिशन वी प्रोड्यूस एनर्जी एज वेल एज फ्यूजन वी प्रोड्यूस एनर्जी। Now it is very surprising how both of these reactions produce energy, one where you are combining, other where you are breaking. Normally our science, you always understand that if you are gaining energy in one way, when you reverse the process, you lose energy. So why it is that in this particular case, in both the ways we receive energy, once where we are splitting and once we are combining them together. So actually, the reason is that these two are not the same material. So if I show you the curve here, on the x-axis we have mass number of the nuclei, and the y-axis we have binding energy of per nucleon, binding energy per nucleon in mega electron volts. If you look at the center of this, the vertical curve here, that relates to iron. On the left side, starting is hydrogen with a mass number of 1. Then hydrogen isotopes are there, helium is there, lithium is there, and so on. These are all smaller in atom mass number compared to iron. When we are talking of uranium-235, uranium-238, and so on, these are very heavy nuclei with mass numbers around 235, 238. So actually, the heavier nuclei, which are heavier than iron, thereby splitting the nuclei, you get energy that is through fission process. नाभिकीय विखंडन से यूरेनियम जैसे हेवी न्यूक्लियाई को ब्रेक करने से एनर्जी मिलती है। और यदि हम उसके लेफ्ट में देखें, जैसे आपको हाइड्रोजन या हाइड्रोजन के आइसोटोप्स हैं, तो उसमें क्या होता है कि एनर्जी प्रोड्यूस होती है उनको जोड़ने से, नाभिकीय संलयन से, न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन से। तो आयरन काफी स्टेबल एलिमेंट होता है। आयरन इज वेरी plentiful in the world that we find, and that's why everywhere you find is iron is present. So this is the reason the lighter element left of iron produce energy by nuclear fusion, and heavier nuclei which are on the right side of iron, they produce energy by nuclear fission. So this is the story behind this. So sorry, यदि हम फ्यूजन के एडवांटेज और चैलेंजेस देखें, so fusion is very hard to achieve because of the fact that we are trying to produce energy by combining two nuclei which are of the same charge. So it yields more energy than fission. It's 3 to 4 times energy it produces compared to fission. There's no chain reaction that is involved in this, so there's no possibility of explosion. The reaction requires very hot fuel. It requires, because you need to create this very high temperature that I was talking about of 10 to 20 crores degrees centigrade, and you need to keep it in a closed space for these components to collide and fuse and create this energy. So as I mentioned in the news, the temperature that has been achieved already 160 million degree Kelvin or 16 crore degree centigrade, which is almost 10 times that of the core of the sun, which is about 1.5 crore. What you see in the surface, जो आप surface sun के surface देखते हो, उसके सतह पे देखते हैं, वो केवल 6000 से 7000 डिग्री है. 6000 to 7000 degree centigrade is the temperature of the surface of the sun. What we notice, actually, when you see the core of the sun is where 1.5 crore degrees temperature is there, and we have produced more than 10 times that temperature on the Earth. So actually, for last 60-70 years that we have worked, the plasma, the physics part is well understood now. What we are trying to do is to overcome the engineering hurdles in making sure that we can have commercial production of nuclear fusion-based energy. If you look at the various possibilities, so nuclear fusion, there is not only one reaction, there are different reactions that can take place. One of the very popular one is deuterium and tritium reaction. Deuterium, tritium are hydrogen isotopes. For example, all of you would have heard of heavy water. Heavy water is based on deuterium. So deuterium, tritium reaction is the one that is favored maximum. It can also have deuterium and deuterium fusion. And you can even have, for example, proton-boron fusion. Hydrogen fusion that takes place. If you look at this curve, at the x-axis we have kinetic energy. In some sense we can relate it to temperature. And on the y-axis is what is called the fusion cross-section, that what is the, how much more cross-section possibility of reaction is there. So if you look at deuterium tritium, you can see that it is peaking at this place. It is peaking at this place. So it is happening at a much lower temperature. Of course, that lower temperature is not low by any standard. It is still 10 to 20 crore degrees centigrade. And it is also very high cross-section compared to other reactions. Proton-boron reaction is peaking at this point. It is almost like 2 billion degree centigrade temperature that is required. But proton-boron reaction, there is an advantage that I'll come to later on. So if I look at these three, there are many others also. We are normally talking about deuterium-tritium reaction. And as I mentioned, the rate for this is that deuterium reaction is much larger than that is happening in the sun. Even deuterium reaction is also happening at much faster rate than that in the sun. The sun is much slower, but because of the vast mass of the sun, that it produces amount of energy that is keeping the whole solar system alive. So that's why deuterium-tritium plasma is the one that is the candidate. Now I brought this term plasma here, and I also mentioned this earlier. So if you look at in our science books, we have talked about in physics, we have talked about 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. Now when you are talking of temperatures like 10 crore degrees centigrade, 20 crore degrees centigrade, no material can remain in solid, liquid, or gaseous form. It will actually ionize, and it goes into what is roughly referred to as plasma state. So the sun is in plasma state. Now we don't talk about plasma normally because plasma is not found naturally on the Earth. So, but 99% of universe is in plasma state. It is also referred to as the 4th state of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and then comes the plasma. So that's why we scientists, nuclear fusion scientists, are also referred to as plasma physicists. And that's why what Gaganji mentioned was Institute for Plasma Research that was set up in Gandhinagar National Lab around 1983 is called Institute for Plasma Research. This must be distinguished from plasma that is used in biological system, for example, blood plasma and so on. So this deuterium-tritium plasma is a candidate for fusion reactor. That's why most of the things that we are focusing right now is in deuterium-tritium plasma, but there are other things happening. Now to have deuterium-tritium plasma, you need raw material. Where will deuterium come from? As we'll talk about, deuterium will come from water. About 0.015% of water is heavy water from which we can get deuterium. On the other hand, the tritium is radioactive with half-life of about 12.3 years only. That means left to itself, it will decay very fast. So it is not naturally found. So what we need to do, we have to actually breed it from lithium. So by bombarding lithium with neutron, you can produce tritium. Let me explain this one more time. So what we are targeting normally has been taking deuterium and taking tritium and having fusion reaction of that. So you see these two are combining together here, and they produce helium carrying 3.5 MeV neutrons, 3.5 MeV energy, and then you produce neutrons that are carrying 14.1 MeV energy. And now to produce tritium, we actually have lithium blankets surrounding the main core reactor. Lithium blanket is surrounding the core reactor. And the lithium blanket absorbs the neutron. It heats up the lithium blanket, and some of the lithium nuclei undergo a reaction with neutrons. So this is lithium combining with neutrons, and it produces tritium and helium. So tritium is consuming, and it gets regenerated and recycled and brought back. And what you're producing is helium. So both places helium is being produced here also, and through this reaction also. So net outcome is helium and energy, and tritium is the recycling system. So though tritium is not available in nature, it's very rare, but it can be bred from lithium reactor. So lithium blanket plays two roles. One is capturing energy and producing tritium. So both of these are happening because of this reaction that is taking place. So let's move to the next slide. Now I wanted to actually talk about how much material do you need? How much material do you need to actually make sure that you can have sufficient energy? If I compare this with coal, for example, if I take 10,000 ton of coal, the amount of energy that's going to produce will be produced only by 800 grams of deuterium tritium. यदि हम 10,000 टन कोयले को लेते हैं, उसमें जितनी ऊर्जा उत्पन्न होती है वो केवल 800 ग्राम जो ड्यूटेरियम ट्रिटियम मटेरियल को लेकर हम करते हैं, रॉ फ्यूल करते हैं, उतनी एनर्जी उत्पन्न कर सकते हैं। आप देख सकते हैं कि कितना ज्यादा एनर्जी हम उत्पन्न कर पाते हैं। और जैसा मैंने कहा, ड्यूटेरियम इज कंटेन्ड इन वाटर 0.015%, पानी में 0.015% ड्यूटेरियम अवेलेबल होता है। और जैसा मैंने कहा कि ट्रिटियम को हमको उस रिएक्टर के अंदर में ही जनरेट करना पड़ता है। यदि हम एक सामान्य उदाहरण ले, इफ यू टेक अ वेरी सिंपल एग्जांपल, एनर्जी फॉर 50 इयर्स, एक कॉमन एवरेज फैमिली के लिए टू प्रोड्यूस एनर्जी फॉर 50 इयर्स, यदि आपको एक परिवार के लिए, एक साधारण एक एवरेज पर साइज के परिवार के लिए यदि हमको ऊर्जा उत्पन्न करनी पड़ी 50 साल के लिए, तो केवल एक बाथटब का वाटर लीजिए और एक लिथियम आयन बैटरी जो कि हमारे लैपटॉप में होता है, उस साइज की जो लिथियम आयन बैटरी है उसमें जो लिथियम होती है, ये लिथियम और एक बाथटब वाटर के यूज से, न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन रिएक्शन से हम इतनी ऊर्जा उत्पन्न कर सकते हैं जो कि 50 साल तक एक एवरेज फैमिली की एनर्जी रिक्वायरमेंट को सप्लाई कर सकते हैं। सो वन बाथटब ऑफ वाटर कंबाइंड विथ लिथियम अवेलेबल इन लिथियम आयन बैटरी इन लैपटॉप्स फॉर एग्जांपल कैन प्रोड्यूस एनफ एनर्जी टू लास्ट फॉर 50 इयर्स फॉर एवरेज साइज फैमिली। Now let me introduce two terms. One is called break-even point and one is called ignition point. For any energy source to be useful, it is very clear that the amount of energy that we produce must be much more than energy that we are putting in to start the process. So suppose I put 50 megawatt of power inside to produce nuclear fusion or any other process which we are wanting to get energy from. It must produce more than 50 megawatt, 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt of power, so that there is net energy gain. So break-even is the point. Break-even is the point where the amount of energy that we are putting in is equal to the amount of energy coming out. That is called the break-even point. And there is a point called ignition point. In the ignition point, what happens is once the reaction starts and the energy is being produced, it does not need external supply of power. Just like when we try to burn the paper, we light a matchstick and we start burning the paper, and then the paper starts to to burn on itself. So similarly, ignition is a point where actually once the nuclear fusion reaction starts, you don't have to put in energy from outside, the reaction becomes self-sustaining from the energy that you produce. So these are the two terms that are useful for our understanding. So if we look at the progress, if I look at the central ion temperature in the x-axis, and this is called fusion triple product, which is in some sense, it is telling you the merit of the fusion reaction that is taking place is the triple product. Here you will see that the yellow region here is the break-even region. The yellow region is the break-even region, and the orange ribbon is the ignition region. So actually there are few points that in the break-even, so we have achieved break-even. The ignition point is not shown there, but very recently, as I showed in the news, National Ignition Facility Lawrence Livermore Laboratory using laser fusion has been able to demonstrate ignition, but for a very, very small fraction of a second, billions of fractions of a second. That's what the recent claim of National Ignition Facility in Lawrence Livermore has been there. And ignition is also the goal of International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, but we have to wait for some time for that to happen. In terms of safety standards, there is no possibility of meltdown in fusion reactors. We have had fission reactors accident. Recently in Japan, where due to tsunami, there was a huge destruction in Chernobyl Island, then Three Mile Island. We have had accidents in US, we have had accidents in Russia, we have had accidents in Japan. These are some of the most developed countries. There also meltdown has taken place, accidents have happened. India safety standards seems to be very, very high so far. We have not seen any significant accidents. In terms of radioactive waste, the fission waste that is produced in nuclear waste as a nuclear waste has a very long decay life of 10,000 to 100,000 years scale, and it decays very slowly, so it remains radioactive for a long time. Whereas the fusion neutrons, what happens when you produce neutrons? Some of that neutron actually escapes the structure, escapes the containment structure. As I will talk about, we actually create a structure that confines the plasma. Some of the neutrons escapes that, and surrounding structure, it bombards. So slowly, for 10, 20, 30 years, per time, it starts to become radioactive that we have to replace it. But it's a very short half-life compared to that of fission. And also people are working on low activation materials so that this problem does not take place. And there are other ways of, I mentioned about proton-boron reaction, which does not have neutrons at all. And that will not even have this problem because there's no neutrons involved. So as I mentioned that the kind of challenge that we have is that we need to produce 100 to 200 million degree Kelvin. Thus, a 20 crore degree temperature confinement, you confine the plasma with magnetic field structure. It's like creating a cage of magnetic field, using magnetic field. It's like a पिंजरा, एक मैग्नेटिक पिंजरा हम बनाते हैं जिसमें कि मैग्नेटिक फील्ड के जरिए हम प्लाज्मा को कन्फाइन करते हैं. आप जानते होंगे कि एक यदि चार्ज पार्टिकल होता है तो मैग्नेटिक फील्ड लाइन के इर्द गिर्द घूमते रहता है, तो वो एक उसके साथ एक बंध जाता है. The magnetic field lines actually confine the charged particles. The charged particles go around rotating around that magnetic field. So this property is used actually to confine the plasma using magnetic field. Now the temperatures that we are talking about, no material on the earth can sustain. So you cannot make of steel or anything else, ceramic. You cannot make that. Everything will be destroyed and will be ionized and converted into plasma form. So that's why what we are trying to do is to use the magnetic field. Magnetic field is not a material. We're using the property of magnetic field to confine plasma. Inertial confinement is another technique which I will talk about later on. But very typically what is used is to use laser beams, very, very high powered laser beams from all directions, multiple directions. You shoot on a very small deuterium pellet, and that produces energy for a fraction, a very small fraction, billions of seconds, very small fraction. And that is what National Ignition Fusion Facility has been talking about. I'm going to focus more on magnetic confinement today. There's a blog, my blog site is ranjan.in, where I've talked about how I got into nuclear fusion research. And very close to NCERT is also another major campus of JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University. In 1981, when I was going to US to do my PhD, my research work at that time in Delhi University And as part of National Science Time Center Scholar, I was working in TIFR in the summer with Dr. Nardikar on black holes. And on that basis, I was going to US to do my research. My admission was based on that. But this story I'm talking about, how at that night, when I was sitting close to NCERT campus in JNU, the number of people who had come to see me, of my friends, my relatives, and that time suddenly when I was leaving the country, how I changed my mind and I decided that I will work on nuclear fusion. It came out of nowhere. This is the story that was written in my blog here. There's one more blog that I would like to refer the viewers and the audiences, is my contribution to nuclear fusion. This I have written more recently, which actually combines together many other blogs I've written on my contribution to nuclear fusion. So those of you who are interested can actually go through this and you'll get very good insight. Some of these stories I'll talk about next time because they're very interesting in themselves. If you look at the different approaches, I talked about magnetic confinement and inertial confinement. There are many, many different ways people are trying. Which one of these or how many of these are going to be successful commercially, we do not know yet. There's a lot of effort going on. You can see I'm not going to go into any details. Just wanted to show you that the effort in different ways are trying. बहुत अलग-अलग तरीके से लोग प्रयास कर रहे हैं न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन को अचीव करने के लिए. जो मैं बात करना चाह रहा था मैग्नेटिक कन्फाइनमेंट के, तो एक जो सूर्य या स्टार्स के अंदर में होता है वो ग्रेविटेशनल कन्फाइनमेंट बोल सकते हैं उसको, और जो मैं लेजर फ्यूजन की बात करता हूँ वो इनर्शियल कन्फाइनमेंट का एग्जांपल है. लेकिन मैं जो अभी बात करूंगा वो मैग्नेटिक कन्फाइनमेंट की बात करूंगा. मैग्नेटिक कन्फाइनमेंट की बात करूंगा जिसमें हम मैग्नेटिक फील्ड यूज करके एक पिंजरा बनाते हैं जिसके अंदर में हम प्लाज्मा को कन्फाइन करते हैं. इसके अलग अलग अप्रोचेस हैं, द डिफरेंट अप्रोचेस. वन इज लीनियर कन्फाइनमेंट, of which example is magnetic mirror, linear confinement, and the toroidal confinement techniques, which there are two examples. I'm going to show you that. So let me first discuss the mirror concept, linear mirror concept, linear confinement, in which what is done is that you have these just like solenoid, your solenoid which is having magnetic field, you can see the central, the number of coils like a solenoid, and on the two ends there are very strong magnetic fields. So on the two ends you have very strong magnetic fields. So that's why you see the field lines closer together. And in the center, the field lines are a little weaker. At the edge, the field lines are stronger. Now what happens is that as the charged particle goes around, it is tied to the field lines. Most of them actually reflect back from them because of strong magnetic field. So they go around and then reflect back, and they keep going back and forth. They keep going back and forth between the two ends. But some of them which are following the very close to the axis, like for example, particles following this field line, they actually escape from the ends. They leak out from there. So magnetic mirror was a very useful concept and remains a useful concept, but it has a problem of leakage. So what people thought, instead of having this linear thing, can I combine, rotate this around and form a torus so that the leakage is not there. That means it is coming back on itself. And that was the concept of toroidal system, to avoid end losses, that is in the magnetic mirror concept. So you need to twist the field lines helically to compensate particle drifts. And this is what is referred to in two very popular schemes. One is called tokamak, and that is the most popular one, and another is called accelerator. Okay. Tokamak is the most popular one right now. Most the work going on in India is this. The ITER project is also based on tokamak. The tokamak, so what happens is that when you try to, I talked about making that field line and trying to convert them to torus, we actually have the one more problem it creates. The problem is that while it avoids the end losses, the charged particles, the plasma starts to be thrown out slowly. It drifts out of the confinement system. So to make the confinement better, we need to produce one more magnetic field, and that is what we call as poloidal magnetic field. That is in this direction. So you have toroidal magnetic field in this direction, and you have poloidal magnetic field in this direction. In the tokamak concept, this poloidal magnetic field is produced by driving a plasma current inside. I'm going to give you more detail in next talk. But basically, there are two magnetic fields. One is the toroidal magnetic field that is produced by these external magnetic field coils. And there is a plasma current that is driven by transformer axis. Inside the plasma current is also very, very large. For example, it could be of megaamperes. And that also produces four magnetic fields. So the magnetic field produced by magnetic field coils and the magnetic field produced by the plasma current, both of these combine together to form helical field lines, which are actually more suitable for confining the plasma in a better way. Okay. So, in the accelerator techniques, both these fields are produced by external coils only. So, in the accelerator concept, both the magnetic field, the toroidal and the poloidal fields combining together form helical field lines is produced by external coils only. Okay. So, these are two concepts. The accelerator concept came earlier actually, and was being worked upon by various people. Tokamak concept became popular in 1960s actually. My work, PhD work in 1983 to 86 that I did, was called helically linked mirror arrangement, where I combined the concept of linear mirror and accelerator together in what I have called, is shown in this. I'm not going to go into details of this. To avoid the end losses of magnetic mirror, I combine them through helical links here. There are three of these. This is three-dimensional, it is not two-dimensional. So this segment is mirror segment, these three segments are mirror segments, and these three are helicals. So it's a combination of accelerators and mirrors, and I've called this device THELMA, triangular helically linked mirror arrangement. I'm not going to talk about this. I've not followed it up after my PhD work because I got busy with tokamaks. Okay. The first tokamak that was built was in Russia. I believe it was in 1950s. It's called tokamak T1. Tokamak word stands for toroidal magnetic chamber in Russian. It's a Russian abbreviation, tokamak. It was a Russian invention. T1 was built first. The picture that you're seeing of T1, then T2 was built, and then T3 was built. So T1, T2, T3. The third machine that was built in 1960s, they claimed very, very high temperatures. उन्होंने रशियन ने ये क्लेम किया कि काफी ज्यादा टेम्परेचर उनको दिखाई पड़ रहा है इसमें, तो जो पूरी दुनिया थी वो चौंक गई उस टाइम और लोगों को विश्वास नहीं हुआ. People did not believe that you can achieve such kind of temperatures. So then team of researchers from Western world actually went to Russia to measure the temperatures, and they also said that yes, what the Russians are claiming is true. And from that time, lot of devices, accelerators, all they were converted to tokamaks, and tokamak became the main research that has been going on worldwide. But of course, as I mentioned, there are a number of other techniques that are also being available. So tokamak combines two fields. One is being produced by the plasma current, and one is produced by the external magnetic field. So this is, for example, an example from Garching in Germany. But this tokamak concept is pulse device. It is not stationary. Whereas the accelerator is stationary. Now, to get the plasma to heat to that kind of temperatures we are talking about, it is not simply possible by what is called ohmic heating. Again, I'm not going to go into details. You need to supply additional power through radio frequency heating or through neutral beam injection heating. I'm not going to talk about this today. I'm going to talk about this next time, which is more technical. So we can heat up these plasma to very, very high temperatures that we're talking about. As I mentioned, we have already achieved 160 million degrees centigrade. हम 16 करोड़ डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड तक अचीव कर चुके हैं, जो कि सूर्य के टेम्परेचर से 10 गुना ज्यादा है. If you see this curve, it shows the timeline and the x-axis here, and the different types of devices on the y-axis. You see the large number of devices. I'm not going to describe, but it's covering the whole space here, and this shows that the variety of work that has been done over the last 70 years. If I compare the performance, you can see these are the different sizes of machines. For example, I'm going to talk about the temperatures I'm talking about in China is in this machine, East machine it's called. There's one more in Korea that I'm going to talk about is this K-Star. Okay? And the ITER project that was talked about was this project. You can see very large device, a very large device. JET has been operating in Kallam in UK for a long time, Joint European Torus. AA3 is the most successful tokamak in San Diego in US, run by General Atomic, a private funding agency, a private agency. In fact, this very interesting concept between US and India is that in US, government funds national labs to be run by private agency because they found that private agencies are able to do much better work using the money efficiently. So in US, there are private entities running national labs, like AA3 is the most successful one, which is run by General Atomic in San Diego. Gentleman who is heading General Atomic right now as CEO is Mr. Vivek Lal of Indian origin. So magnetic confinement research has been going in from 1940s, and current research efforts are very internationally based. The International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor ITER that is being built in France, as Gaganji mentioned, this will be expected to be ready by end of 2025 or 2026 when first plasma is expected. First plasma expected in that. This is a collaboration between US, Europe, Japan, India, China, Russia, and Korea. In 2007, this agreement was signed, but the work had started from 1985 between Reagan and Gorbachev. The discussion was there, but it took a long time. If you look at the money that is being covered, initially it was expected to cost about $10 to $20 billion. $10 to $20 billion, but the cost has overshot already $20 billion. Out of this, Europe is giving 4/11th part of this. Japan is giving 2/11th part of this. US, India, China, Russia, Korea is giving 1/11th part of this. The headquarter of this project is in Japan, and actual device is being built in Europe or in France, south of France, in Cadarache. India has been member of this from 2007, and there is the ITER India project in parallel. You can see this is the site picture from ITER project. You can see Indian flag flying high here. And if you look at this ITER project, the contribution from different countries was both in cash and kind. Okay. So different countries were supposed to produce different parts of this machine and supply that. India was given the task to produce a cryostat here. You can see the cryostat here. The Indian flag is being shown here. And this cryostat is actually the largest component of ITER, and the largest component is the cryostat inside which the whole machine sits, that has been supplied by India successfully. It was manufactured in India by Larsen & Toubro, and this was supplied already and is already set there. And now the rest of the construction is going, assembly is going on, different parts of different countries have come, and this process is going on. Is expected by end of 2025 or 2026, the first plasma will be produced. But first plasma that will produce will not produce deuterium-tritium reaction. It will be only hydrogen or helium plasma probably. But in 10 years' time, around 2035 to 2036, they plan to have first deuterium-tritium reaction. That means the nuclear fusion reaction that will take place in ITER is going to be only around 2035 to 2036, not in 2025, 2026. If you look at the size of this, the height of this is about 30 meters. 30 meters. You can see a person here standing is almost not noticeable. 30 meters means 8 to 9 story buildings. That is the size of the machine. It's huge machine. And obviously you can understand the complexity of designing such a system that is going to take a lot of time to make that, and it's been going on for a long time. So if I look at the progress of nuclear fusion, if I compare this to Moore's law, most of you are familiar with the Moore's law. The red curve here that's being shown is Moore's law, that is showing how the semiconductor industry is progressing very fast, has progressed. We have been all aware of this. The computer is part of this. In the parallel to that, the nuclear fusion, the figure of merit, this blue curve is showing. So actually the amount of progress that nuclear fusion says is somewhat similar to that in the semiconductor industry, electronics industry, and we are all using this. Nuclear fusion has also made similar progress. You can see the lines are almost parallel to each other, except that we are yet to achieve the commercial utilization of nuclear fusion, and that's why it has not come into general public's mind. And I'm thankful to NCERT for actually having these talks to make sure that people become aware of this, the children become aware of, the teachers become aware of this, because there's some very exciting time ahead that I'm going to talk about. If I look at the Indian scenario, in 1980s the work started. Aditya, as was mentioned, was set up in Institute for Plasmology at Gandhinagar, and SINP Tokamak was set up at Science Institute of Nuclear Physics in Calcutta. The SINP Tokamak started to work in 1987, Aditya started to work in 1989. So SINP Tokamak is the first one in the country to start operating. This picture that you see is of a SINP machine, this is of Aditya machine. I'm not going to go into details of these because short of time, but SINP Tokamak, the size was smaller compared to Aditya, whereas Aditya was much bigger. The SINP machine, Science machine, was built by Toshiba in Japan and brought into India and assembled. Aditya, large parts of Aditya was built in India itself, so it's indigenous development. This is the view of SINP Tokamak. The height is not very high. The lab was like a normal height. I was here from SINP from 86 to 95, 9 years I worked on this machine. And then Aditya Tokamak, which was set up in 1910, the hall is very big. It is about 3 floors height, and there are other surrounding structures and buildings around this. This I was there from 1995 to 2002 as project leader of Aditya Tokamak from early 96 to 2002. So these 2 machines were built in 80s. I was actually responsible for making both of these devices operate. And Aditya Tokamak from 89 to 95 was not working properly, not working up to international standard. When I joined in 95, then after about joining up 2 to 3 months, I got a chance to make changes in the machine. And about 5 days time, I could get it to work. This is written the story in my blog, how this was a 5 days miracle. And then I was made project leader of this. I was there for till 2002. And the third one, the machine that was built is a superconducting machine, SST1, that is there. So right now, SINP Tokamak is almost not operational. It is there, but hardly being used. Aditya Tokamak is operational. I'm going to talk about this. It's been now converted into Aditya Upgrade, and SST1 is also operational. So now, Aditya Tokamak after 25.
Professor Ranjan, I think that now the time is running out. I have some questions, so we can break our talk for today's talk here.
Yeah, so I will just give me 1 minute.
Okay, sir.
So
okay, sir. Please.
Next time I'm going to discuss these different tokamaks, this SST1, and what is the performance of different things, what are the technological advancements that are taking place, due to which we are seeing the progress of nuclear fusion happening fast. Private investment is growing in this field, and India also has started a project in my, which is being nucleated at my university. I'm going to talk about that. This is the project Sanlayan, and how other countries are trying to attract industry and other people to come to nuclear fusion. So next week, I'm going to talk about different aspects of this. So let me stop today because of the shorter time, and let's take questions if there are any. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ranjan. Spectacular indeed, sir. We learned, yes, 1 bathtub of water with 1 lithium-ion battery is sufficient probably for the whole lifetime for an average family, Indian family, at least for 50 years. Spectacular learning. We learned a lot about many things today, and we are receiving many questions. And in fact, I am also a student of physics and a student of nuclear physics. I also have many questions in my mind, but I am sure that many of those will be answered in your next session. In fact, some of the questions has already been answered by you, but still I am receiving some questions from the YouTube, and my colleagues here also have some questions. So I will take up those questions one by one. First, let me take one question from what we are receiving from YouTube. Nuclear fusion, you said you finished that the public-private partnership, we are yet not familiar or I mean comfortable with the public-private partnership in nuclear fission experiments or in many other defense or energy related experiments. So it becomes very curious that when we are dealing with temperatures like 10 times of the temperature of the sun, can this public-private partnership can be considered reliable in the sense? Your comment, sir.
Yeah, so actually if you look at the developed world, whether you look at US and Europe and so on, they have been doing this not only in this sector but also in the nuclear fission sector, which is actually a much more dangerous thing. In fact, as I mentioned, the fusion is a much safer thing. So even if something goes wrong, it will just cool down. But fission, which is actually a much more dangerous thing, where meltdown has already taken place 3 places in the world, in US, in Russia, and in Japan. There also these private industries handling directly. So in India, actually, somehow we don't have faith on the private industries. So I'm not even talking about public-private partnership. Purely private industries also dealing with it, and they are the ones who are able to commercialize this. So if you look at whole nuclear industry based on nuclear fission itself, which is a much more dangerous thing, is actually happening around the globe. In India, we have somehow not crossed the barrier to have faith on private industry. But fusion is even much safer. The temperatures we are talking about, so hard to produce that if there's anything that goes wrong, it will just cool down. There's very little fuel inside. So actually we need to move towards this. Even now I will tell you also that even in military defense also, the whole world is changed to actually, not only today, it's been happening a long time. Even military civil fusion is taking place in China, which means that today military and civilian work is combining together. So actually this barrier between private and public should go away, and we should look at how to best achieve the goals that are desired for the country. And actually to tell the viewers that Government of India has already taken certain steps of trying to bring private industry into nuclear and space. There's an announcement in this direction. Next time maybe I'll talk about that. Thank you so much.
Sure, sir. So now I have a question. My colleague Dr. C.V. Shimre has a question for you, sir. Dr. Shimre, please.
Yeah. Sir, you mentioned about ITER project, which is an international collaboration. But I'm curious to know, where do we stand? Like, what can we do to speed up utilization of nuclear fusion in India? So if you can just briefly tell us about that. I'm sure you have more in your next session, but for today, if you can just briefly tell us about that.
Yeah, so ITER project is a huge one where India is a partner. What has happened is that other than India, all the other partners, their domestic programs are equally large. So they are able to gain from ITER project and progress faster. India's domestic program is nowhere comparable to ITER. With the last machine that we designed was superconducting machine SST-1 that I'm going to talk about next time. That was designed in '95. I designed personally, I was also project leader of SST-1 Operation and Control Group. After '95, we have not designed any more machines. It's almost 26 years now. Now there's some effort going on. So India needs to actually have large domestic projects similar to ITER, and it should be distributed across the country. Right now, there's only one center in the whole country. So we should have both in the private sector and research labs and universities. It should be broad-based, large nuclear fusion projects should be there to make sure that we can get advantage from the ITER project. And at the same time, as I am talking about, there are new concepts that are coming, which is going to be very different from ITER. And frankly, my opinion is that before ITER starts to yield a significant amount of fusion reaction, we would also have smaller machines delivering much more power. So the whole game is changing that I'm going to talk about next time. But India needs to have much more better planning in terms of nuclear fusion.
Sir, we are at NCERT, which this is the organization which is largely related with the school education and processes within the school involved in the school education systems in the country. So we have Dr. Sunita Farakia with us, who is heading this department of Department of Education in Science and Mathematics. She feels like asking to you something related with the school education and the nuclear fusion experiments. So Dr. Farakia, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Gagan. I have two questions in my mind, sir, and both are related to teaching and learning process. For my first question is, since the concept of nuclear fusion is very important and it should be known to school students, so how schools can address this, make their children aware about the concept? My first question is this, and second question is, field visit is an experiential learning. So whether the students can visit nuclear reactor, nuclear fusion reactor, this is my second question. I want to know, sir.
You mean fusion research facilities?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir.
So let me take the second question first, because that's easier to answer. So right now, effectively, only one place, Calcutta has tokamak, but that's been not operational for 10 years, so still people can go and visit. Institute of Plasma Research is where the active research is going on, and of course then you have to go outside the country. So IPR actually, on Science Day, it actually has open house for everybody to visit, and also periodically, it organizes visits by others. Now, when I was there, I used to myself handle all of these. But what can be done today is actually we can have virtual tours, because using the techniques that we are right now connecting to, you can use this tool to have a tour which can be done at a very large scale, and so people will get benefit of, the students will get benefit of visiting the thing without actually having to physically move. So that NCERT can discuss with the Institute of Plasma Research to work it out. Coming back to because right now there's no other center right now which is active, so this is the only place that within India. And of course, it is possible to also do it abroad with the virtual linkage that we have right now. And I'm sure that they are already there. There are, coming back to school education part actually, just like you talked about experiential learning, it's also important experiential learning in the school level. Okay. I'll give you one simple example. Today, one of the technologies that I'm actually trying to push into Indian system is techniques like 3D printing. These are all part of what is called digital manufacturing. So I'm chairman of National Steering Committee of Idea Labs of AICT. AICT is also very close to NCERT. Through that, we are trying to spread the use of 3D printers, laser engravers, CNC machine, and so on. And that using 3D printing, actually, you can, for example, download a tokamak design and print it in the school or the colleges. And that you can create a tabletop which you can take out different parts, assemble it together. That will also give very good learning to the students. And I'm doing it in my university, and I can collaborate with NCERT to make sure that it can be done at various schools. Like Atal Tinkering Lab is already there in many places. You can use those facilities to actually 3D print tokamaks or eater model, a scaled down model eater, which will make sure that the students, without visiting the eater, can actually get very good experience. And similarly, more popular lectures like what you have organized today needs to be done at the school level to make sure that people understand this. But what is very important, and what you are doing, is that also to actually make sure that teachers are aware of this, what is happening. Most time what we find is that neither teachers nor the students are aware of that. In India also we have been working for 4 decades. Even policymakers do not know about this. So there is a lack of knowledge about nuclear fusion work being done in India for a long time. And as I mentioned, and I'm going to talk about more about this, the first time in the country, through private investment, I have started Project Sanlayan, which is being nucleated in my university. It's being funded by Silicon Valley investors. They've set up a company called Elbot Technology in Pune, which is partnering this. So actually now we are hoping that more private industry is going to come together. And today I'm going to request, today evening I have an event where I'm going to request Maharashtra government to actually promote this area in Maharashtra. Thank you.
Sir, yes, thank you very much, sir. In fact, our physics class 12 textbook has back cover of this ITER, where the dimensions are being compared with the human height. Yes, we are indeed in the process of doing all those things. So we will be seeking more and more collaboration, not only with D.Y. Patil International University in future, but other universities, other educational systems, standards here in the country and outside. We look forward listening you on 21st of September once again, sir. And it was indeed a very informative, very spectacular talk. We all enjoyed it. I am getting comments through YouTube. Many of them are saying that aaj maja aa gaya. But I am sure that we will continue having this maja in our 21st lecture too. Viewers, we are going to meet again on 21st at the same time, 10 a.m. on the second part of this popular talk by Professor Prabhat Ranjan. Till then, goodbye. Namaskar.
Thank you for the opportunity. We'll see you on 21st. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.